everybody, my name's Emily. Welcome back to Jacey's Creek, where I talk about Pacey and Joey as a couple and as individuals. Today we are doing episode 7, Escape from Witch Island, and this came out on November 17th, 1999. If you would like to get in contact with me throughout any point of this episode, if you'd like to subscribe, do go ahead and do so. There is a way to subscribe on YouTube. That's Jacey's Creek Podcast. There's also another way where you can do Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your platforms. Make sure to review. Leave a nice one because that would help a lot to keep going on. And lastly, if you have not already, make sure you follow my Instagram and TikTok. The Instagram is Witter and Potter, and the TikTok is Pacey and Joey. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, like I said, we are on episode 7. So the first scene that we have is scene 1 of Joey. And Dawson is working at the video store when all of a sudden Joey comes up in a frantic, and Dawson's like, "Joey, hey," and she goes, "Dawson, please tell me you have the crucibles." And personally, I love the crucible. Was that just me? I wasn't the only one who liked that. I haven't read it in a while, but it was a pretty good book in my opinion. And Dawson says, Ben Lynn checked it out about an hour ago. And Joey says, "Oh, well, serves me right, I guess, for being that girl." And Dawson says, "What girl?" And Joey says, "The girl who rents the movie the hour before all the important papers do. Because her debatable attention deference disorder has gotten in the way of her actual reading." And Dawson asks, "Since when have you been that girl?" And Joey says, "Well, between taking care of baby Alexander and getting the B&B up and running, I haven't had a lot of time for that pesky intuitive Noah at school." And Dawson's confused. He's like, "The B&B? I thought you worked at Maryland. What happened?" So it's funny that Pacey knew all this and Dawson didn't. Dawson's like, "What the heck are you even talking about?" And that's one of my favorite parts about season 3, is that in season 2 it was all about Dawson and Joey, and then when we get to season 3, it's like Dawson has no idea what's happening. And so once Dawson asks, Joey says, "That's a long and strainable stoppy story, Dawson. So what's up with you? You've helped you add any more crimes and misdeeds to your record?" And again, like I said, Dawson didn't know anything about Joey, and Joey didn't know anything about Dawson, because for a little bit, we didn't even see Dawson and Joey together, and it was actually kind of nice. It was nice to talk about that for about 30 minutes to an hour of just plain Pacey and Joey, not Dawson and Joey. And so, Dawson says, "Eve left town, actually," and then there's a really awkward pause going between them two. And Joey says, "Well, thanks a lot, Dawson. I guess I'll see you around school. I'll be the one clocked in failure." And Dawson says, "Hold on. You know what, Joey? What if I told you didn't have to do the papers?" And Joey says, "I'm listening." And Dawson says, "After we get the assignment, I went to Green and said, 'Look, you want the standard 5 pages of footnotes and crammed Wikipedia passage chronically the Salmon witch trials, or,'" and Joey says, "Let me guess, you've stolen my idea of making a movie instead." Classic Dawson Weary. And Dawson says, "Here's the best part. Jen and Pacey are also excused from doing the paper as long as they miss blah blah blah." And Joey says, "I guess my invitation got lost in the mail." And Dawson says, "I would have invited you." And Joey says, "Forget it." And she says, "So what's it about, your movie?" And Dawson says, "Well, since they're reading the Crucible, we're studying the Salmon witch trials. I figured why not do a documentary on something that happened right about around the Crucible. We're studying the Salmon witch trial. I figure why not do something that happened right in the backyard, Witch Islands." And Joey says, "So basically you're ripping out the Blaine Witch Project." And Dawson says, "I'm insulted. I am making a real documentary." That's my first reaction. It's just, ha. And so he says, "I want to try and use the myth of Witch Island, which to the larger of the penance and a procession, so are you in? And Joey says, I could blow off the paper. I probably failed the class. And if I failed the class, spell the beginning of the long trial down spiral that dooms to wait the tables of greasy spoon tragedy, so count me in. One thing I don't like about Joey's character, she kind of makes, college seem like a big deal, which in 1999 it probably was in 2000s, but at the same time, I'm like, it's kind of sad that you have to, pass your PSATs, do well in school, just to make, college for the rest of your life. We never asked to go to college, in a way, but in another way, we kind of have to. So, that long, boring scene led to scene 1 of Pacey and Joey. I did like Joey's, outfit in scene 1 that she had, but I do like her hat in scene 2. It's a grayish hat in a way, and she looks so cute. And so Jen says, I gotta say, Blair Witch Trial didn't do it for me. I wasn't remotely scared that girl was irritating me, and I had to run to the snack bar in the deer of the Jameen. And Joey was like, I was scared. And Pacey says, that's no surprise there, Potter. After all, you are quite the skittish kitten. So, that's my favorite part about, them two and season 2, or season 3, is the fact that, they, tease each other so much. And it's not that type of tease where, you get, the boring old tease. No. You get, the kind of tease where he's like, that's no surprise, Potter. And I love how he calls her Potter. That will literally be my favorite thing in the whole season, series, whatever, of Dawson's Creek. That is my favorite thing that Pacey does. He calls her Potter. But this scene, it was kind of you can just tell how much they've grown together. And Joey hits Pacey and Pacey hits her back. And it's kind of a cute scene where we just it was basically them flirting. And in front of Dawson, which I'm surprised Dawson didn't catch on at all. And so he calls her the skittish kitten. I always want to say kitchen. Skittish kitten. And Dawson says, I thought the Blair Witch Trial was groundbreaking. Hollywood learned to the waist by a couple guys, but the camcorder, how was that? And Pacey says, frankly, I think my father makes scary movie with his home camera. You guys want scary? Check out the Witter family Christmas project. Guaranteed to make your teeth chatter. I love how Pacey's just always making jokes about his dad and brother. That's one of my favorite parts, because it's you can just tell that Pacey just doesn't have a good home life and he just makes a joke out of it. And Jen says, before we're off to see the witch, I would like to imply that there are some things as witches I say is wishes just a buzzword for a girl who happens to follow complete healthy, totally natural urge and explore her sexuality. But you see, you do swinging in 60-90 without getting the good townsfolks up in arms. So what are these pulsive priests do instead of reaching for the Verge? They brand these girls as witches. They send them off to a God-forsaken island to die horridly and subtly deaf. And I don't know why Jen just randomly went on this whole rant like that, but Joey's reply to this was, well, lucky for you, Jen. I mean, we live in a world where you can follow your natural urges without fear of persecution. So if you haven't, read or heard of the Salmon Witch Trial, that's kind of what Jen just basically described it. And Joey's like, well, lucky for you, you don't have to do that. And Jen says, you're right, I would have so burned for the stake by now. And Dawson says, okay, I think it's time to set up some interviews. Joey, leave me a hand? And Joey says, sure, because now they're in, the hallway. I forgot to say this. They were in the hallway now by the lockers, and the way that Joey smiled, and then when Dawson asked this, she looks kind of, startled a little bit, and it always, kind of made me laugh. And so, Dawson, once Joey says sure, Dawson says, and you guys rustle up some interviews. And Pacey says, yoo-hoo, and yeah, Captain or Director, have some fun, kids. Doesn't that warm your heart? And wants them to walk away. Kevin and Willie take the first sinners to the Wonderlands, and he's talking to Jen. And Jen says, actually, that kind of makes me glad that you and I are forethought not to hook up. And Pacey says, amen, Sister Christian. And Jen says, why is that you think that? And Pacey says, well, if you look at the critical research, you'll find that the smart-ass sidekick, he never needs a girl. And Jen says, oh. And Pacey says, now the real reason there's never you and me, Lindley, is because you and me, we don't need anything from each other. And Jen says, I'm sorry, I left my ring back in the cereal box. And Pacey says, you see, as the girl who wanted ways from her banish to the boonies, you need to expunge unhealthy small towns pure heart to validate in your oh so vulnerable time, right? And Jen says, yeah. And Pacey says, me and the Spencer black sheep of the Witter crew, I guess I just need love and attention of a woman who drives and devoted would shame me to the core to force me to touch with the, I don't know, shall we call it inner achievement. You and me, we're different. We're playing field. And Jen says, and I thought Dawson was good at this construction. So, one thing I do have to say about this scene is where Pacey says, I guess I just need love and attention of a woman who is driven devoted would shame me to the core and would force me to get in touch with, I don't know, the inner achiever. So I feel like that was Pacey, like, kind of talking about his type. Like, Pacey always went with people who believed in him in a lot of ways. Obviously, an exception of Audrey, who was just kind of like a fling in college. And I would say the season 6, there was 2 main girlfriends who really, really focused on Pacey and who he was, and then there was Jen, who always believed in Pacey. And I do have to say, with Pacey, he wanted someone who knew that he could do something, and he wanted a girl who knew that he was worth it. And I feel like that was kind of Joey a little bit in a way. But I feel like Joey was so blind in some of the episodes where you can just tell, like, she was like, what am I doing here, Pacey? But in another way, I feel like it was one of those things where it got, like, to the point where eventually Joey was kind of his type, and we can tell. But with Jen, it wasn't that, like, she was dating material for Pacey. It was more like she was more a friendship that Pacey needed. Because we talked about how when Andy came in, Pacey was, like, Andy was kind of supportive of Pacey once she got, like, the vibe of him and he got the vibe of her. Like, she helped him out, she made him study, she did all this different kind of stuff, she encouraged him, she believed him. And I feel like that was Jen in a sense. Like, even though Pacey was dumb, like, she was always there for Pacey, and especially in season 3, but as the show go on, like in season 5, you can tell that Jen was always there. So even though, like, them two didn't, like, get together, I feel like Pacey and Jen were good together when they were friends, and later, like, we can tell that when Pacey was talking about love and affection, he was kind of talking about Joey too. So scene 2 of Joey was where Joey and Dawson are outside setting the cameras for the interview, and Dawson says, I can't tell you how much I miss this. And Joey said, me too. And Dawson says, I feel lucky. And Joey says, so do I. It's kind of funny how Dawson always talks about, like, the memories, and Joey's like, me too. Not really. So did I. Not really. And Dawson says, you know, like I've been able to recap a feeling that I lost somewhere along the way. And Joey says, I know what you mean. And Dawson says, I mean, granted, it's only a school project, but I know it's good for making movies again. And Joey says, I thought you were talking about us, you and me. Which I thought they were talking about, like, them two as well, but, like, Dawson's like, a school project, like the movie. And Joey's like, what? And Dawson says, that's two, obviously. You and I missed the whole, like, let's make a bug thing before things get so temporary aggressive. You know, I'm really glad we're friends again. And Joey says, friends. And it's kind of clear that, like, Joey's just like, why am I here? What am I doing here? So then we have scene 2 of Pacey and Joey. And I just want to point out before anything else that Pacey does help Joey in this scene get into the boat, because this is the boat scene. And I just want to point that out before I continue, like, going on, because I didn't want to forget and I thought it was really cute. And so Pacey, Joey, Dawson, and Jen are walking to the dock where they are about to catch the boat to Witch Island. And Pacey says, nobody brought snacks? Come on, guys. What is a field trip without snacks? Nobody brought the Doritos, the Ho-Hos, and for the Coke and wraps in tinfoil? And a man says, it's Dawson O'Leary party, right? And Dawson says, yeah, like, completely ignoring Pacey, who was over here, like, kind of freaking out that no one has snacks. And he's like, Dawson's like, yeah, I'm making a movie. And the man says, only if you return the favor. And he pulls out a camera out of his bag and starts filming Dawson. And you can just tell all of them are just smiling. He says, alright, so what is your movie about? Dawson's weirded out by this, but everyone's just kind of, like, looking around like, what the heck? And he says, I'm making a documentary on a witch island. What's your movie about? And the man says, I'm making a documentary about people making a documentary about the witch islands. And he says, ever since Blair Witch hit and ever geeked with the camcorder, and a dream has been out there, so a little luck and this baby will get me to the festival circus, right? And Dawson's kind of weirded out by this, but you can just tell, like, Pacey and Joey and Jen are just like, this is kind of funny. And Dawson says, yeah, what can you tell me about the Witch Island? And the man says, you kids think it's all about spook and fun and kissing cool and all that, but don't get so caught up in your Scooby-Doo adventure that you get stuck in the past in the dark. And Jen says, oh, come on, we don't get scared that easily. Literally, Joey would get scared that easily, but we're not going to talk about that, because literally Pacey was like, you're such a scared kitchen. Jen later was like, we don't get scared that easily. And so the man says, she's calling me a liar? You call me a liar? Is that what you said? Huh? Listen, girls died out here. You don't think they're a little ticked off of what happened out years ago? You think that there are angers of a teeny booter or two ever once in a blue moon, huh? These girls, sometimes they can't control their natural urges. Alright, all aboard, let's go. And you could just tell, like, Pacey's just, like, sitting there, like, relaxed. So, if you haven't heard of, like, the witch trial and all that, which I'm sure, like, most of you guys have, because, you know, you're not, like, 14. But, I just want to say that because, like, obviously if you're past high school by now, you probably have heard of the Salem witch trial. And I remember the first time I heard it, and I was like, what the heck is this? And I'm trying to look up a definition. Probably because I haven't put witch trial. But I read this book a couple years ago, and I learned what it was about, and I was like, dang. Okay, so the Salem witch trial is where a series of hearing and persecution of people accused of witchcraft in Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused, 30 were found guilty, 19 who were executed by hanging. So this started on February 16, 1992, and that was based off of Wikipedia. But there were, like, people there who obviously were, you know, victims, and I'm going to go based off the history and read a little bit more, because I feel like in honor of this episode we should totally do this. So the Salem witch trial ever just go on a website and it just pops up with the ad? You're like, I don't care. Why are you here? Because the history just automatically came up. So there was, in January 1692, 9-year-old Elizabeth, aka Betty Paris, and Abigail Williams, the daughter and the niece of Samuel Paris, minister of Salem Village, began to have fits, including violent control and uncontrollable outbursts of screaming. After a local doctor, William Scares, diagnosed bewitched, other young girls in the community began to experience similar symptoms, including Anne Purchin Jr., Mercy Lewis, Isabel Huberden, Mary Wilcox, Mary Warren. In late February, arrested warrants were issued for Paris Karen Slave Temptle, along with 2 other women, the homeless beggar Sarah Good and the poor elderly Sarah Watson, whom the girls accused of bewitching them. So this was kind of like, when I heard it, I was like, that's not right. So if you haven't read The Crucible, I will read the summary for you. Because I found The Crucible really, like, intense. And it was based off of, like, a 1954, like, play. And, like, there was, like, a couple acts, but if you ever, like, watched, like, the book or the movie, it was, like, weird. And so it tells the story of, again, the young girl, Salmon Witch, who falsely accused other villagers of the witchcraft. Their execution trials pushed the village into its series where 200 villagers are in the deaths of 19. And the main point of The Crucible is based off of goodness and all this different stuff. So it was, like, the whole thing is intense itself, and this, like, I feel like I should have mentioned that, like, before we started the episode, but at the same time, like, this is what it means when, like, Jen was talking about earlier, when she was talking about, like, the, like, persecution and that kind of stuff, but, like, there was, like, a lot of things that were going to come up, where it was like, oh, that was definitely from The Crucible, and so I had to, like, mention that, because the Salmon Witch trial and stuff was based off of, or, like, Crucible was based on the Salmon Witch trial. So then we have the next scene. After there, we see Pacey just kind of relaxing on the boat, and we have scene 3 of Pacey and Joey. So they're at the island, exiting the boat, and Pacey is calmly helping everybody get off the boat. And and Wendy comes up. She's one of the people who work there, and she says, "Hey guys, welcome to Witch Island. I am Wendy Ripple of Cape Side History Social Society, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the Witch Island, which I am ashamed to say represents a dark period in our nation's history." And Jen says, "Oh dear God," and I love Jen's reaction. And Pacey says, would you happen to have a snack bar or anything up here, would you? 'Cause I'm finished. And Cameron over there decided to cancel the 7-Eleven run before we got on board. Which, I love how Pacey's just not concerned about anything that's gonna happen. He's like, I'm just hungry. Like, someone give me food. And Wendy says, "You'll find some refreshments in our gift shop, young man, along with a lovely suggestion of our witch-themed souvenir." And Jen says, "Ooh, I like souvenirs." And Wendy says, "Making a little movie, are we?" And Joey says, "He's ripping off the Blair Witch Project." And Wendy says, "I see. Come with me. I'll take you to the cemetery. Goes very well with your filmmaker types." Got a lot of astonishment, and Dawson says, "Hey Joey, you recognize the Blair Witch was fake, right? Whereas my documentary is real." And he recorded Joey when he said, I believe when he said that, or like at one point he does record her. No, he doesn't. He records this later. So then we have scene 1 of Pacey and just Pacey. And so then we have Jen and Pacey in the gift shop. And Jen says, Pacey, check this out. And reading out a spell book, she says that wicked crash got you down. Don't stare at him for hours without getting so much as a glance in return. Do you ever call and hang up, riffle through his garbage? Has the thought of it disappointing his girlfriend ever crossed your mind? Stalk more ladies with the handy-dandy encounter that will turn the object of your affection into a love-stick puppy dog. And Pacey says, dream on, Lindley. And Jen says, what do you think it's all worth for? And Pacey says, not to land strainer, no. Actually, to be a land strainer, my belief in the power of spells is somewhere up with my belief in the validation of sea monkeys. And Jen says, I'm going to try it. And Pacey says, really? On whom? And Jen says, you. And Pacey said, me. And Jen said, who better? You're not too attracted to me in the slightest. And Pacey says, not in the least. And Jen says, ouch. And Pacey says, no, I didn't mean it like that. You're quite the opposite advantage. I'm just not very, and I am nothing fond of you, but you're just not my type. And Jen says, right back at you, man. And Pacey says, I'm brimming and Jen says, I'm sure you scored way on the higher of the QO measure. Pacey, just not mine. And Pacey says, I better catch you than the tie of the Bible beater of the sketch claiming of Jeff Wolf. And Jen says, this is a guy who's coming from two past relationships has ended either leaving town to avoid prosecution or cool off in the crazy camp for the summer. And Pacey says, ouch. Which I want to know, did Pacey ever get his food? Like, that's what he was there for. And the way that Jen said, like, how, like, two girls were leaving, like, he came at her and she came back at him, like, whoop. Like, we thought it was Jacob and Andy. And then we go to the next scene of Joey. And I'm kind of going, like, a little bit fast because it gets to the point later. And so then we have this scene, and Dawson and Joey are alone because Pacey and Jen are doing some witch potion over there, and Joey says there is only 12, and Dawson says, what? And Joey says, well, there was 13 witches, Dawson, 13 girls were sent, and there were only 12 grays. And Wendy says, smart girl, no one ever picks up on that. Her name was Mary Witch Duck, and Dawson says, what happened to her? And Wendy says, her body was never found. No one knows for sure what happened, but two desperate schools of thought. Those her was a ghost story. Well, they believe that she was a witch and she haunts the island to this day. But those who are romantic, they believe that her lover came and took her away from this awful place. And Joey says, her lover? And Wendy says, yeah, if I'll give you the cliff note, Mary, an orphan, she was taken to the name of the Benjamins, and a long race for their son, William. William and Mary got along famously, so much in fact that in time they fell in love. And Dawson says, uh-oh. And Wendy says, one night, Mary and William were found in bed. This did not go well for God-fearing Bennets. And in a blink of an eye, Mary was no longer their daughter. She was a witch. And Joey says, how horrible. And Wendy says, can you imagine this poor girl had gone through? This girl, no older than you, put on trial, banished to some God-forsaken island for crimes that she didn't understand and much less commit. She was separated from the love of her life. I think that island much changed place. Because if you love someone that you couldn't be with, you can feel in the air sadness, longing, and uncertainty. And, okay, so obviously the show kind of makes it about Joey and Dawson in this scene, because they're talking about how, like, they were, like, if you love someone, you need to be with them. And I think that is what makes everyone, in a way, not like them, because it's so forced with them. Like, with Pacey and Joey, it was never forced. Like, as you can tell from this season, like, they were never, like, forced in a different type of way. Like, it was them trying to, like, make it work. And, like, find a way to make it work and all this different kind of stuff. Like, from the very beginning of season 3, Pacey and Joey, like, Pacey comfort her. Pacey, like, made her involved. Pacey didn't push her when he needed. Joey looked out for Pacey when it was come to Andy and Pacey. And, like, Pacey looked out for Dawson. But in another way, he kind of looked out for Joey because, not I guess Dawson told him to, but I feel like Pacey just wanted to do it in a certain way. And he's doing the B&B with her. He's, like, doing different things with her. And it's not like this was a forced relationship, but, like, from the writers, it wasn't very forced. But with Dawson and Joey, I always thought it was forced. And especially now when we're, like, on episode 7 of season 3, like, it was kind of, like I said earlier, it was kind of nice not having Dawson and Joey in these scenes. But in another way, it was kind of like, okay, like, where is the point of all of this in another way? But, like, when we get to see, like, Dawson and Joey and how they are, like, nothing has changed from season 2 in a lot of ways. But in another way, there was a lot of things because I feel like Joey just had a lot of character growth when she wasn't with Dawson. And then having her again with Dawson, I felt like we kind of, like, lost where it was kind of like, oh, you're my soulmate, you're all this, and you're all that. And I feel like that's where the show, like, really messes up in a certain type of way, because they make it where people are telling them, like, oh, like, if you really love someone and you can't be with them, it's sad and longing and uncertainty. And obviously, like, Joey's thinking about Dawson and Dawson's thinking about Joey, and we know as a viewer, like, that's what their two are thinking. Like, we're almost in the middle of season 3. Like, I know, like, there was a lot of, like, emptiness and that kind of stuff, but, like, shouldn't we see them, like, move on or something? Like, it was kind of, like, awkward throughout this whole episode with Dawson and Joey. So, Joey says, are you taking this, Dawson? And that's where we see the video of Joey. Dawson says, what do you mean? And Joey says, soulmates torn apart by circumstances beyond their control, doomed to wonder what they would have been. There's your movie. And Dawson says, what about the fire? Where did that happen? And Wendy says, through the woods at the church. And Dawson says, can you take us there? I'd love to get some footage. And Wendy says, no, because I never go into the woods. And if you were smart, you wouldn't either. But if you decide to go, we'll take some maps inside the gift shop. Like, we can just tell that it was just kind of weird. So then we have scene 2 of Pacey, where, like, I love how Joey and Dawson were, like, all serious about the movie. Meanwhile, Jen and Pacey were, like, back in the gift shop, and Jen's, like, mixing her potion. And Jen says, lights glow and feed on the floor. Chant these words to make them yours. She said some random words over here. And she drinks some of the brief, and Jen says, you're Richard, and Pacey's like, excuse me? I'm sorry, it sounded like you said something about me consuming that god-awful monk. And Jen says, say right here that both of myself and a draught of my affection must increase your potion in order for the spell to work. And Pacey's like, no. And Jen's like, please, pretty, please. You don't have to swallow it. The precious potion. And Pacey says, fine. But Lindley, Bayback is a bitch. And he drinks the potion. And Jen says, how do you feel? And Pacey says, nice and fresh. It would be funny if he was like, act like he just loved her automatically. That would have been funny. But I just love how Dawson and Joey were so serious. And meanwhile, Pacey and Jen were just making, like, a potion. That's just the difference between Dawson and Pacey right there, where meanwhile, like, Dawson's always so serious about this kind of stuff, and Pacey he doesn't give a crap about that kind of stuff. Like, he's like, I'm just here to have fun. Like, I just want to know where the food is. Like, come on, tell me all this different kind of stuff. And I feel like that is kind of where Joey lightens up in season 3, unlike season 2. Because I feel like she is with someone who is, like, kind of a little bit crazy in a certain type of way. And I feel like that's another way where Joey kind of lightens up in season 4 a little bit, too. Because there was tension in season 4, or season 4 obviously, but also in season 2 there was a lot of tension. Like, there was a lot of, like, Joey acting all serious, and Dawson was acting all serious, and when we got to season 3, she kind of lightened up, because I feel like she needed someone like Pacey, and this just kind of just proves it. So then we get to scene 4 of Pacey and Joey, and Wendy comes in, and she's like, what is going on here? And Jen says, just a couple of crazy kids practicing a little bit of black magic. And Wendy says, you shouldn't mess with things that you don't understand. And she hands Dawson a map, and she says, here is where you take the woods and go to the church. And oh yeah, don't get lost because it's very dark. It's very dangerous. There is a slim chance that you will never be seen from here ever again. Okay? And Joey, Jen, and Dawson and Pacey are like, what the heck? So then we go to the next scene, which is scene 5 of Pacey and Joey. And Jen says, take that Mary Welcome girl for example. Was she a witch? I think not. Sounds like it was just a bad case of warm fuzzies. And Joey says, it's too heartbreaking for words. And Dawson says, I couldn't agree more. Of course, Dawson, you agree with Joey. And Joey says, how do you figure? And Dawson says, it's illustrated how love can thrill even in the worst circumstances. Like, again, like, it's kind of talking about the end of season 2 with Dawson and Joey. Like, they were kind of like, it was the worst circumstances with everything that happened with Joey's dad. Like, I keep mentioning what happened with Dawson and Joey because that was kind of the whole point of the episode. Obviously, the Witch Island was a very important part of the episode, but it was kind of like, there was a lot of things that happened with Dawson and Joey that were just unsaid. And so, Joey says, yeah, and look what happened to her. And Dawson says, no one knows what happened to her. And Joey says, well, I think it's safe to assume that Mary died a very sad and lonely death, separated from the one boy that she loved. And Dawson says, I don't buy it. If people are truly, madly, deeply in love, they figure out a way to be with each other. And Joey says kind of what I'm thinking. She says they were young, they were split up for a long time. Maybe he forgot about her. Maybe he met someone else. And Dawson says if he met someone else and forgot about her, then obviously they were never meant to be together in the first place. See my point? And Joey says, could you be any more naive? And I love how, like, Joey's like, why are you like this? But in another way, I feel like Dawson is not wrong, but I also feel like he's not right, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like if you love someone and they're meant to be together, like, obviously they'll come back eventually. So, this is kind of an example of this, and it's kind of a weird example, but this is what I have in mind. Like, I had this friend for a very long time, and I was about 5 or 6 when she moved away, and this is kind of a weird example, but me and her never talked, and then finally one day I found her on Instagram, and ironically it was after one of my friends got mad at me, and we stopped talking, and it was kind of one of those things where if it's meant to be, it will come back to you, and then that's what I haven't been looking at her for years, and she was my childhood best friend, and finally I found her. And then another example was when I was 14, I want to say. I had a friend who didn't want to talk to me, and friendship breakups are the worst. So she stopped talking to me, we stopped talking for a year, and then randomly she came back. So I always say if it's meant to be, it will come back, but if it doesn't meant to be, then it won't happen. And obviously that's kind of a naive thing to think, but also in another sense, it's just life. Like, if people are meant to come in your life, they'll come in your life, and if not, they're not. But also, I want to say, with this, it doesn't really remind me of Dawson and Joey. It kind of reminds me of Pacey and Joey, because in season 4, they break up, and then they come back together in season 6. And I feel like they were kind of meant to be because they kept coming back to each other. And on this show, they kind of made it seem like Dawson and Joey were meant to be together, so therefore they kept coming back to each other. But I feel like it was like a 2 different side of the relationship that just kept coming back. So Dawson says, could you be more cynical? And Jen says, could you be any more irritating? Heads up, guys, we're here. And Pacey says, What do you think the chances are that the men's room in here? I think I got a heavy on the witch brew. I love how Pacey's just like, where's the snacks? Where's the restroom now? 'Cause I have witch brew and I need to pee. So then we have the next scene of Joey, where it's back at the church, and Dawson says, listen to the townspeople build the church because they thought it would help the girls find God. Send a miniature every Sunday, but the girls would tease him so massively that it eventually gave up and stopped coming. And Jen says, I can hang with those girls. And starts leaving the church, and she says, I wonder if Pacey loves me yet. And I love how Joey and Dawson are so serious, and Jen's like, has Pacey fallen in love with me yet? And Joey says, they are murdered. And Dawson says, pardon me? Beg your pardon? I hate people who say beg your pardon. If you are one of those people that go, beg your pardon? It irritates me. I don't know. Or they go, pardon? And I'm like, why be so formal? Like, say, it's like, huh? Like, you can say, huh? Or what? Like, that's fine. Like, don't say, beg your pardon? Pardon? I'm like, shut up. Like, I know this girl who always used to say that, and I was like, shut up already. And Joey says, it's fine that a group of men from the main island treated the island like their own personal brew, but when word got out, the Bible thumpers got together and decided enough was enough. An angry mob came and crowded the girls into the church and set it on fire. And Dawson says, and when William must have run off with Mary, and Joey says, hold on, Romeo, why are you reading into this all of a sudden? How do you know that William didn't light the torch? I love how Joey's just trusts it should just come out automatically. And Dawson says, I don't know, maybe because he loved her. And Joey says, how do you know how he enlightened Mel? Dawson, if the whole town thinks your girlfriend is a witch, maybe it's easier to go with the flow. Which is true. Like, if everything happened, like, it's just easier to just kind of let it go. And Dawson says, that's not the story I'm interested in telling. And Joey says, well, the good documentary looks at the story from all possible angles, Dawson, not the perspective of his story, an annoying world of view. And Jen comes back into the church, and she's like, has Pacey showed up? And Joey says, not since he went to search for the perfect tree. And Dawson says, we gotta get back, it's starting to get dark. And Jen says, I'll go find him, you two go back to the boat guy and make sure he doesn't leave without us. We'll see you guys back at the docks. And I love how, like, Joey's just like, Pacey went to find the perfect tree. But at the same time, I'm like, that's a little bit weird. Like, I love how they're, like, finding the perfect tree for him. Like, when you were little, did you ever, like, have to stop on the side of the road and, like, just go pee on the interstate? 'Cause like, in the woods, because I remember when I was little, and someone told me I had to pee, like, on a tree. I was like, absolutely not. I am not doing that. You go find a tree, and you go pee on it. I'm not peeing on that thing. That's what kind of reminded me of. So then we go to the next scene, where Dawson and Joey are walking up to the docks, and Dawson says, Joey, why are my optimists have you so irked? And Joey says, not that you're irking me, Dawson. And Dawson says, what is it? And Joey says, what's going on with us? The reason why I'm saying, is because why do they always have to talk about what they are? Like, just let it go. And Dawson says, yeah, Joey, this is not the time or the place, and assumption depends on your state of our relationship. And Joey says, right. We should go stand and watch it crumble around us. We'll deal with it later when it's more convenient. And Dawson says, Joey, we're friends. Why can't we just leave it at that? And Joey says, friends. And Dawson says, yeah, you can't take everything that we are and what we are. We're friends. So, it just makes me so mad. Like, this is one of the reasons why you can't be friends with your ex. Because there's a lot of things that happen, but at the same time, I'm like, you can't be friends with your ex because it just seems like a big deal. And with Dawson and Joey, it is a big deal because they're like, we can't be friends because they're like we have never been friends. Like, when they were childhood best friends, I believe that in a certain way, they were kind of like siblings in a lot of ways. Like, you know, like those shows that go, I view as a brother. Where is that from? It's the one with, Ryan Gosling, Ryan Reynolds, where he's that big dude. Hold on, I have to find this now. It's where they're like, we can't be friends. And if you ever seen Harry Met Sally, like that's another prime example where there are like TV shows that say you can't be friends with guys. And I believe, like, I've heard this like a couple of times where you can't be friends with guys, but also in the same way, like, I believe like you can be in some type of way. Like, when you are Just Friends, that's what it's called. The ones with Ryan Reynolds, it's called Just Friends. I watched that movie a couple months ago. But, like, when you're friends with a guy, it is kind of hard, or whatever sexuality you like, or gender you like. I feel like it's kind of hard to be friends with that person because there's a lot of, like, pressure. Like, this is the stereotypical thing that we talk about in the world, where if a girl likes a guy, it's a big deal because at one point, one of them catches feelings, one of them likes each other, one of them does this, and in our world, like, I heard this on a podcast this week where love is so, like, easy to make it seem like it's actually love, you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference where girls and guys get together and it seems like everything's fine, it seems like everything's okay, when really it's hard because love with girls and guys have been so stereotype that it's kind of hard to figure out the difference. So that's where I feel like you can't be friends with your ex a lot of times, and if you are, like, I guess good for you. Like, how did you manage to do that? Another sense, I'm like, that's a little bit weird. And obviously, like, at the end of the show, Dawson and Joey are friends. But in another sense, I'm like, ma'am, like, just let it go for a minute. Like, you do need, like, space, and this isn't space. Like, they never give each other the space that they need. Obviously, we haven't seen Dawson and Joey for a couple episodes. We haven't seen them since the homecoming episode. But in another sense, I feel like they still needed that space to get away and just leave each other alone. And Dawson is like, we're over, like, this isn't it, we're just friends. And Joey's like, no we're not. And Dawson says, you know, I gave up. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what you're talking about. And Joey says, of course you don't. And Dawson says, well, explain yourself. And Joey says, Dawson, what do you exactly know about my life? I mean, think about it. Do you know how I lost my job? How I did on the PSAT? How the Potter sisters are eating their minor living? And I don't know a thing about your life either. I would have to say this, but Pacey knows about it. Like, Pacey knows about all that. And I feel like in this season, like, Dawson kind of got replaced by Pacey for a little bit. And Dawson apologized for being so distant. And he says, I thought that's what we needed. And Joey says, you know what? The last year of my life has been this wide awakened nightmare of conflicts and emotions. And no matter how bad it got, there was only one thing that kept me going. And that was us, our bond, our connection, whatever you want to call it. And it made us feel I wasn't alone. That there was a part that was special. So I'm not standing here whining about being friends or not friends. It's just for the first time in my life, I'm feeling that connection. Okay, so for this part of the scene, there's a long thing I have to say. They kept pushing each other. So it wasn't the fact that they want to be friends, and I feel like Joey kind of missed it. You know, like her life got hard, therefore she relied on Dawson. And it wasn't that she was relying on Dawson in the sense where she was like, oh, like, Dawson, I need you, I want you, I need to have you. It was more like a sense of, Dawson, you're my childhood, and my life is so hard right now that I need you. Like, I feel like that's kind of how it was. And it wasn't the fact that Dawson was being distant. It was the fact that, like, Joey said in the end of season 2 that she needed her space. And it was kind of like ever so often in the season, like randomly they would mention that they need to be friends. And I like how Joey calls him out, but in another sense, I feel like it was kind of like one of those things that just needed to be left unsaid. But it was kind of hard because they've been friends for about, 10 years. And in a sense, it was like they met when they were 5. They needed each other when they were getting together. Like, they needed each other when they got together as a couple. They needed each other when they broke up. They needed each other when they got back together. But like, now they need each other, but in a sense, like, Dawson kind of broke it in a way. Like, Dawson went and told, like, on Joey's dad, like, the one person who was important to her, and he broke that bond, he broke that trust, and I feel like the relationship was already over when, like, Jack kissed Joey. Like, I feel like that was kind of a thing, and they kept pushing it because they thought they were soulmates, or they thought they were going to end up together, or there was, like, a way where they could get back together. But in a sense, in, like, a real, like, world life thing, like, that wasn't how it was meant to be. Like, the show keeps putting it in that sense of way, but in another way, like, she goes on to say our bond, our connection, or whatever you call it, I feel like I wasn't alone, and it was something special. I feel like it wasn't that. I feel like it was the fact that she knew that Dawson was going to be there no matter what, in a sense. Like, if she climbed through Dawson's window, 9 out of 10, or 8 out of 10 in this season, he was going to be there, and he was going to show up for her. But in another sense, it was kind of sad that Joey, like, she kind of, like, when Dawson and her broke up in season 2 for the last time, it was kind of like she lost everything. She lost climbing into Dawson's window and hanging out with him. She lost the Gail part where, like, she would randomly come to her house and she would get hugged. She missed the part where, like, she had that certain kind of thing. But in another sense, it was she lost him. And even though she had Pacey, I feel like it was one of those things as well. She never really appreciated Pacey up until the point where it was, like, a last couple of episodes. And it was what I was talking about last episode. Like, Pacey did all these different kind of stuff, but Joey never really saw it. Like, Joey wanted what Joey couldn't have. And she wanted the money. She wanted the dad. She wanted the mom. She wanted the, like, perfect B&Bs. She wanted everything. She wanted her job back, but sadly that's not how Joey Potter's life worked, and she wanted Dawson, and Dawson wasn't the correct person for her. However, as we keep going on this, like, show, like, we can tell that even though Joey wanted him, it was hard for them to be friends because it wasn't one of those things where they could just come together and act like nothing happened. It was the fact that, like, it was hard, and they couldn't find that connection. And so Joey says, "So I'm not standing here whining about being friends or not friends. It's the first time in my life I have not felt that connection, Dawson, and that's what scares me." But in another sense, oh, that's what Dawson said. Because, yeah, that's what Joey said. So, in another sense, I feel like Joey is trying to figure out what's happening, but Dawson is like, "Joey, like, I'm sorry, like, everything has been kind of weird lately, and we can do this. It's us, it's what we are, and it's how we are." And Joey's like, "No, that's not how it is." So, once we get past that whole spit over here, the man who was first shown in this part of the, like, setting, he leaves, and he says, "There you are, great, get in, let's go." And Joey says, "No, we can't leave yet, we got split from our friends." And the man goes, "Stupid, stupid, stupid, didn't I warn you guys that you were going to get stuck out here past dark?" "I'm sure that I did." And Dawson says that they'll be here any minute. And the man says, "No, no way, I'm not staying. Weird things happen out here at night, so you guys gotta come with me. Or I can come in the morning and find if you guys are alive." And Dawson says, "We're not leaving our friends. We're not leaving without our friends." And the man says, "Fine, I warned you, I told you. Whatever you do, don't go out the woods." And the man, like, leaves, leaving Dawson and Joey like, "What the heck? Like, we were just talking about our friendship, and now we're stuck in this place." So then we have the next scene where it's scene 3 of Pacey and Joey. So after Pacey did his lovely witch brew pee, he and Jen decided that they were going to find Dawson and Joey. However, they're walking around the woods, and it's dark now, and they cannot find Dawson or Joey. And Jen says, "So do you feel anything yet?" And Pacey says, "Feel what?" And Jen says, "The spell." And Pacey said, "Yeah, I'm actually starting to feel something. I think I'm starting to feel a little lost. What is it? What is it, lost?" And Jen says, "Yeah, I know. This, I gotta say, the idea of the wholesome Bible-themed meal this evening with Grands isn't so too gosh darn appealing. I even said saying grace, but instead I'm trapped around some haunted forest with the likes of you." And Pacey says, "Why am I always the bad guy, huh? Do I deserve this? I don't think so. What is it with me that Flynn's device? Take Andy, for example. She goes away for the summer and sleeps with a mental patient. So I break up with her for the contract unbearing a girlfriend, something that I think I was pretty justified doing. And yet she managed to turn it around on me, and I feel like a creep at the end of the day. How is that possible?" I love how Pacey's just like, what makes me always this man? Like, I feel like with this show, there is 2 sides of Pacey that they write him in. They write, or kind of 3, they write him as a sex person, like that really loves sex, and he always talks about sex. Or they write him as like a very insecure boy who doesn't know what he wants in his life, and he's kind of goofy and goofing off. Or he's a lover-dubber. He just loves on everyone and everything. And I feel like he's number 2 right now. Like, he is a very insecure boy who doesn't know what he wants. And I feel like it goes back to that. Like, he was like, what makes me, like, such a creep? And he's kind of insecure because last episode, Andy kind of blamed him for what happened last thing, and we saw him talking about how true love was the way where he was going to get better, and how he was going to rebuild his relationships with someone else, and it was all going to be okay at the end, and they can't restore the relationship, but Andy kind of made him a bad guy, and obviously he kind of feels guilty about that. So Jen says, "What do you think? What? You think you're a creep? Just wait until some sweet, innocent freshman gets a crush on you, and you accidentally, on purpose, break his smiling little heart and through his glove life forever." And Pacey says, and she's talking about Henry, and I love how Pacey replies because he says, "You know, love is a horrible habit of messing things up." And Jen says that it is. And this is where I was talking about with the 3 things. And Pacey just turned into number 1, where he says, "But sex is nice." And Jen says, "Yes, it is. Sex, yes, it is. Sex is good, love is bad. You tossed it into the work, it messes the whole thing up." And Jen says, "This is true." And Pacey says, "I'm starting to think maybe casual sex is the way to go." And Jen says, "But sex is never casual, Pacey." And Pacey says, "Perhaps, but what both parties agreed to the terms beforehand." And Jen says, "Like a prenup?" And Pacey says, "Yes, exactly, like a getting busy to get agreement." I'm just thinking out loud here, but the concept of 2 horny teenagers coming together for the greedy, nasty clients and partying as their friends is positively resolutely in the day of age. And Jen sounds like a killer in theory. And Pacey says, "No guilt?" And Jen says, "No shame." And Pacey says, "No bad games." And Jen says, "No bad tapes." And Pacey says, "Yeah, I hate those." So it goes back to what I was saying earlier with Dawson and Joey. Like, you can never have, like, that kind of love that you think you're gonna have when you have a boy that is a friend. Like, it's kind of one of those, like, intense things where you feel like you have to be something because what if the other person likes you? What if this happens? What if that happens? But really, in the truth sense, like, nothing really has to happen. But people make it seem like it has to happen. And so in this scene, it was kind of like what I was talking about with Joey and Dawson, because it goes back to Jen and Pacey, because he wants something so casual. So what I was talking about with the 3 things, where number 1, they make Pacey seem like the sex addict. Number 2, they make him seem really insecure and kind of goofy. And number 3, where he is a lover-dubber. So they are number 1, number 2. That is the things that happens in this episode. He is a sex addict and he is kind of like insecure, but yeah, goofy. And so, like, I don't really think that they made Pacey bad in this episode, but I feel like this, like, Jen and Pacey storyline goes well, because then Pacey is kind of, like, rebounding based off the Andy, and then he goes back to Joey. But in another sense, it was kind of like with Dawson and Joey, like, Dawson was the only one that was holding her back. Like, Dawson was kind of like that person where she felt like she had to be with him because people were telling him. And I was saying there was 3 sides of Pacey, but there's 3 sides of Joey. There is the type of Joey where she wants to please everyone. She wants to be that perfectionist. She wants to do everything correctly. There is where she is fixated on Dawson, but yet she's scared. And there is number 3 where she is kind of, well, maybe I should just make Joey scared. Just in general. We're going to figure out what Joey's kind of sense, but she's just, I feel like number 1 and number 2, where she's like perfectionist and scared to death with Dawson. Wait, those are the 2 things that Joey's character really makes it. And so when you combine like the perfectionist and the Dawson thing with Pacey, you get those 2 together. However, in this episode, it was kind of a sense where Joey was so fixated on Dawson that she never really saw what was happening in this episode. So then we have the next scene of Joey, where Dawson and Joey are back in the gift shop looking for some books and some things. And Joey is reading from Mary's journal, and she says, "Another day goes by without a word from Millie. It's been about a few weeks since I arrived on the island, and yeah, it feels like an eternity. This time a part of me wondering if our bond was but an illustration." And Dawson says, "Is that what you think, Joey? That our relationship was some side of the hand of magic to fill up your life?" Which, at the same time, I feel like it wasn't wrong. Or she says, "Wondering if our bond was but an illustration," because I feel like Dawson and Joey kind of made up in their mind of what they are. And I always did not like that Dawson was like, "Is that what you think about us, Joey?" Like, man, he was reading from the diary. And Joey says, "Look, I didn't say that, Dawson. Don't put words into my mouth." And Dawson says, "I don't have to, Joe." And Joey says, "Dawson, don't you ever wonder where this is going? Where we are exactly? I mean, is this the first act, or is our story ended? And we're just too stupid to realize it." I could make a whole act. Like, this is kind of like the second act when you think about it. I feel like season 1, if this was a play, season 1 would kind of be like the first act, and season 2 would kind of be the second act. Then, or season 1 and season 2 would be the first act. Season 3 and season 4 would be the second act. And season 5 would be the third act. And I feel like there was only 3 acts. So season 6 would be the third act. So it was kind of like, Joey, your story is not ended, but the man that you end up with is around the corner. And so Dawson says, "Why do we have to figure it out right now? What's wrong with just living in the present for once? Because you're like 16. Like, that's why. That's exactly why." And Joey says, "Because the present sucks, Dawson. I mean, excuse me for thinking and looking back, but I'm trying to make sense of what's happening to us." Again, with number 2, Joey, where she's fixated on Dawson. And Dawson says, "Joey, you yourself once told me that love stories never end. What happened to that girl?" And Joe says she offered herself to the boy she loved, the boy she thought would love her back, and he rejected her. And Dawson says, "Joey, listen to me. If you were truly meant to be, then you would find a way back together. It's that simple." And Joey says, "You're so sure about that, Dawson?" And she's reading from the journal, and the journal says, "I fill my days with memories. I remember how he used to look at me, like I was the most valuable treasure. He he was found new treasures. I can't help but wonder if we ever go back our ways to each other. The roads before that seemed so long, and my head is so clouded with such dark thoughts. I feel our bond grows weaker by the day, and I'm powerless to stop it. And then they hear the church bell ringing, and Dawson and Joey gather their stuff and march out of the church. So this is where I'm kind of like from the last episode, where Pacey was kind of talking about the boat. And in this section, Joey was talking about the journals, where she was talking about the road before us seems so long, and my head is clouded with such dark thoughts. So, with the boat last episode, Pacey was talking about how they couldn't restore something that was already broken, and I feel like Joey is learning this in this episode. So, I feel like with the last, these two episodes combined, I feel like Pacey was learning what it was like to have to end it with Andy for real. For real, don't mess with me. And Joey's kind of having to learn that too. And together, they're kind of for the next couple episodes, I really want to say, Joey has to learn how to move on. So, we'll talk about this, but I kind of want to go a little bit ahead. Right now, Pacey's kind of rebounding with Jen, and later, Joey will kind of rebound with AJ, which we'll get into AJ later. But I feel like this is, where I'm at, they go individually, you'll see how them two are learning certain things, and that's how they end up together. So then, after the bell rings, it goes to scene 6 of Pacey and Joey, where Pacey and Jen are waiting outside, and Pacey says, "Hey, you ringed?" And Dawson says, "We thought you guys ringed." And Jen says, "We didn't ring." And Joey says, "Well, someone ringed." And Pacey says, "Well, this is obviously madly particular people." And Dawson says, "What?" And Pacey says, "There's no bell." And Joey says, "Okay, now I'm succinctly wigged." And then it goes to scene 7 of Joey. And Jen says, "How's the 17th century soap?" And Joey says, "She's just got a letter from William." And Jen says, "Do tell." And Joey says, "November 10th, 1693. And Jen says, "That's today." Today, as in November 10th. And Joey says, "That's also the anniversary of the fire." And she reads from the journal and says, a letter today from my beloved William. He has made me so happy he is coming tonight to take me away from this God-forsaken place. Yet I am scared. He says that those in town who feels we have been punished further for our crimes." And she says that is the last entry. Which, I don't know if you guys have read, Anne Frank's, journal. But this is kind of what it reminds me of, when it just randomly stops and we don't know what else happens. And Jen says, "So you think he never came back for her?" And Joey says, "Nah, he probably played her for a fool and took her with some well-breed husky from the mainland." And Jen says, "Come on, Joey. Hop in on the happy train. Sounds like them two are madly in love." And Joey says, "I hate to be one of those girls who mistake popular for profound thoughts, but sometimes love isn't enough." And Jen says, "And I hate to be the one to burst the whole subject bubble you're living in, but Joey, do me a favor, don't let someone else's love life distract your own." So I love how Jen, has to give her advice on this, because it's kind of obvious that, Joey's not really asking for it, but in a sense, they're closer in a sense than they were in season 1. So now they're okay, I can give you this advice that you won't kill me on it, but you don't need to, destroy yourself to the point where you can't talk, find out what your love life is. So then the other side is where Pacey and Dawson are sitting alone. And Pacey says, "You're not filming anymore?" And Dawson says, "Not particularly visible at the moment." He says, "Let me ask you something, Pacey. Do you think I made a mistake?" And Pacey says, "Where?" Look how Pacey's which one? How many mistakes have we made? Because we made a lot of mistakes. And Dawson says, telling Joey we need some time apart. And Pacey says, "Do you think you made a mistake?" And Dawson says, "Not at first, but I look at her now and how far we drifted. I don't know. What if I was wrong? What if we don't end up together and it's all my fault?" And Pacey says, "You wanted to see what I see when I look at you, Dawson. For better or for worse, I see a guy who constantly wears his heart on the sleeve. So no matter how harsh it may seem in recitation, when you decided to put some distance between you and Joey, I know you were doing it was just following your heart. And with that in mind, I don't think it's possible for you to have to make a mistake. So I feel like Pacey really made a good, thing to say, but also because he learned it from Andy. When he said he needed space with Andy, he really meant it, and it wasn't one of those things where he was never mind, I actually don't want to be with you. But it was one of those things where he listened to his heart, he knew what his heart was saying, so therefore he followed it. And Pacey says that to Dawson in a sense because he knew that Dawson was just following his heart, and he needed that in a sense because if Dawson didn't listen to his heart, who knew how Dawson and Joey would be? Who knew if they actually, Joey forgave him and Dawson forgave her in episode 1, and they actually talked during the summer, who knew what it would be? But since they didn't, do what their mind was telling them to do, they started listening to each other. And I feel like there is such a difference between what your head is saying and what your heart is saying, because those two could be the, opposite thing. Your mind could be saying, oh, yes, 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 I want this, but your heart could be saying, no, let's take it back, let's not do that right now. So then we have the next scene of Pacey and Joey. And Dawson is sleeping, and Pacey and Jen are alone, and Joey's on the other side, and she's sleeping too. And Jen says, so what do you think we could pull this off? And Pacey says, I don't see why not. And Jen says, you don't have feelings for me, right? And Pacey says, none whatsoever. No offense, of course. And Jen says, none taken. And Pacey says, you, for me, feelings? And Jen says, hardly even think about you. And Pacey says, you gotta love that. And Jen says, so what do we do? And Pacey says, should I take off my pants? And Jen says, maybe we should kiss first. And Pacey says, yeah, good idea. I love how they start doing that, but at the same time it's your friends are from the other side of the room. What if they woke up? And so they start kissing, but Jen stops, and Jen says, is this a spell? And Pacey says, I don't know, I don't care. All I know is in November of 1999, 4 hyper-verbal teenagers running into the witch on a witch hunt to film some ridiculous documentary for history class. And 8 hours later, 2 of them start making out. And they start kissing again, and Pacey says, that was, and Jen says, weird. And Pacey says, yeah, let's try it again. And they kiss some more, and Pacey says, how about that one? Weird, and Jen says, not so much. And they start kissing. But in another sense, it was kind of I know I was talking about Henry and Sally earlier, where they're you can't be friends with them. And it was kind of like that with, Joey and Pacey. But in another sense, obviously we know that Jen and Pacey become friends, but nothing ever happens. And it's just one of those things where if you force something to happen, you'll end up like Jen and Pacey in that situation. And it's kind of like a rebound situation. That's basically what's happening. So suddenly, there is loud screaming and shouting from outside. And fire is just going everywhere through the windows. And Pacey pulls Jen to her feet. And Joey and Dawson run outside. And there are people Jen and Joey run towards them. And the people outside are yelling continue. And the 4 of them try to push the door open, but none of them can go through. And suddenly the fire and noise stops, and Joey tries the door again, and it just casually opens. And Jen's like, can we go home now? And Joey says, look, I don't care if we swim home, let's just get the hell out of here. And Dawson says, there's gotta be some logical explanation for this. And Pacey says, okay, why don't you spend us a postcards for when you figure that out? Because I'm not sticking around. And the 4 of them run to the dock, but my favorite part about this is you can just see Pacey and Joey just take each other's hand and running, and Pacey's okay. And they run, and suddenly when they get to the dock, the boat is there, and Joey says, hey, the boat's here. And Pacey says, get in, don't talk about Potter, just get in. That's kind of what he's like. And Jen says, go, go, go. And that's when the scene comes with where they're in the classroom. And this is the next scene where Dawson says, but honestly, I had visions of a more straightforward documentary of history, Witch Island. But I was surprised by what I found. A love story. Pure and simple. Two soulmates torn by the social climate of their time. And though what happened on the island is certainly to their own reputation, there is no destroying the fact that the island embodies the emotional turn-off of the girl who didn't know what the future held for her and the boy she loved. And it's a little bit weird that Principal Green is there, but in the same sense, I'm like, okay, like, the principal's there. But I don't even know my high school principal, so I'm seeing how I'm like, okay. And so, Principal Green is like, it's nice work, Mr. Berry. A tad dense in the wake of the whole Blair Witch philosophy, but inspired work nonetheless. I particularly like that part. And a girl, like, in the classroom, she's like, oh, wait a minute. What was that? And pointing to the screen, they kind of see, like, two people on the dock, which was the woman and the man. And Dawson says, what was what? And the girl says, it looked like two people standing on the dock watching you go. See? Look. And Dawson rewinds and pauses, and there's the man and the woman sitting on the dock as the boat drives away. And Dawson gives Joey a look, and then Jen looks at Pacey, and the rest of the class notice it, and they have, like, a weird, like, look on their face. So it was kind of funny that, like, you can just tell that it's based off of Dawson's perspective, but in another sense, like, you can tell, like, everything that happened with this was basically, like, Dawson's movie. So did we watch the episode, or did we watch Dawson's movie? I don't know. So then, later, we see a scene of Pacey, where Jen goes to the video store, and Pacey's asleep, and he's supposed to be working. No. And I love how, like, when she, like, stands there, Pacey, like, kind of gets up, and he's like, whoa, what? And I just want to say, him with the yellow shirt looked really good. And so Jen says, so when are we going to talk about it? And Pacey says, talk about what exactly? And Jen says, what happened out there? And Pacey says, what did happen out there, Lindley? And Jen says, I don't know, I have no idea, but I would prefer that we didn't get in our way of our experiment. And Pacey says, perhaps we should take a shadowy, all-explain events on a preferred silence in the wood as someone else in the omen. And Jen says, no. And Pacey says, no. And Jen says, if nothing else, that glow with little melodrama only provides glove that smokes up everything. As fast as not earlier, where like love just kind of messes up everything, whether you're set to your heart or you're set to your mind, boys and girls. Like, love is just complicated, and it messes with a lot of things. And I know that from personal experience, that you can set a friend zone, but if once you like that person and you like they set a friend zone, it hurts. And I feel like that's where Jen was like, I don't want to get involved with you because I don't want one of us to like each other, and it just messed up everything. And imagine if they took a turn where instead of Pacey and Joey end up together, what if it was Jen and Pacey? Ooh, that would be weird. Anyway, so Pacey says, so then you're still thinking that we should still have sex? And Jen says, yes. And Pacey says, well, alright then. Okay. Did you want to do it now? And Jen says, do you? Pacey says, I'm kind of tired, actually. And Jen says, oh, fine. Roswell on in 5 minutes anyway. So I love how they add that in there. You know, it's actually like the character who plays Chris is on that show anyway. And the person who played Life as We Know It, the person who plays Jax, like Chris or Keir Smith, his wife on the show. Like, he's not actually married, but on that show he's married, and she is also on the Roseville. Anyway, that was kind of complicated, but I just have to point that out. So, Pacey says, okay, so let me get this straight. if I ever find myself in a need of release, you're just going to help me out? And Jen says, exactly, but keep in mind it's a two-way street. And Pacey says, of course. Well, that sounds fantastic. It does. Should we, I don't know, sort of kiss on it? And Jen says, no. And Pacey says, no. And Jen says, no. Kissing is intimate, and we're not about intimacy. Pacey says, perhaps you should shake on it then. And they shake hands, and it says, it's good seeing you. So that was the last scene of Pacey, and I just feel like this is such a rebound stage, and we can just tell that with Pacey. And so the last scene we have of this show, or of we're done with the show apparently. The last scene that we have of this episode is scene 8 of Joey. And so it cuts to Dawson and Joey sitting on his bedroom, and they're looking into the frame on the dog, because of course if Dawson wants to do that, Joey's gonna be right next to him without no problem. And oh, I figured out the third thing that Joey is. So she's a perfectionist, she's fixated on Dawson, and it's kind of like where we act like nothing happened. There, done. I'll figure out another third thing. And so Joey says, I mean, who else could it be other than Wendy and that guy on the boat? I mean, he's a guy, she's a girl, they both have access to the island. They left the boat out for us. I mean, it's only possible explanation. And Dawson says, only possible explanation? And Joey says, let's hear your version, Dawson. And Dawson says, okay, this girl, Mary Webdeck, and the guy, William Bennett. Look at these clothes. I mean, that hat is 17th century clothes, if you've ever seen them. And Joey says, I mean, the crack habit is definitely come between you and your power, Dawson. Obviously, Wendy, the boat guy, were screwing with us the whole time. Which, she's not wrong. She's not wrong about that, but obviously Dawson does not believe her. And Dawson says skeptical, and Joey says sucker. And Dawson says cynical, and Joey says gullible. And Dawson says, I don't know, maybe you're right. Maybe we see the world according to Dawson one too many times. Maybe we should just sit back in the movie theater at the harsh light of the day. And Joey says, I don't know, Dawson, maybe you're right. Maybe William and Mary found their way to each other after all. And Dawson says, you think? And Joey says, it's just a thought. And Dawson says, Joey, I want to apologize. And Joey says, for what? And Dawson says, for taking our friendship for granted. I was wrong to think we could just pick off where we left off. And Joey says, it's not entirely your fault, Dawson. I mean, look at us. We spent years analyzing every little feeling, and doesn't it count for anything? For all that matters what we do, we know that we can take care of each other. So it's not like we talk about this to death. Let's take things slow and take it in check every once in a while. And Dawson says that sounds intellectually doubtable. Doable. And it sounds doubtable, apparently. And Joey says, good. I think this is X-File we're never going to get close to. And Dawson says, not unless we go back. And Joey says, no, Dawson. Dawson says, come on, Joey, a sequel? And Joey says, let's think on how this opens up first. And Dawson says, by the way, how did your PSATs go? And Joey says, brilliantly. So I feel like, in a sense, this was kind of about the romantic sense, but it wasn't in a way. It was about, like, Dawson and Joey having, like, their different aspects where they were friends. And obviously, they had the romantic part where Dawson was kind of Dawson and Joey were Dawson and Joey in season 2, and we see how that ended up. But in another way, they were childhood best friends. And so, because Dawson is Joey's safe place, we go back to Dawson's safe place, but it is different. Like, Joey is like, why can't we go back to where we are? And I feel like that's because it's connected to her childhood. I don't think it's because Joey wanted Dawson in any type of way, but I feel like it's because Joey knew that she wanted Dawson because he was safe. And she wanted Dawson because, I don't know, like, she didn't even know why. And when they weren't talking for a while, like, she's like, oh, I need space. No, I don't need space. Oh, I need space. Oh, I don't need space. It was kind of confusing for Dawson because he's like, okay, what do you need? And this is proof that, yeah, breakups are hard, but I feel like friendships are, like, friendship breakups are even harder than real breakups. And this kind of just proves it right here. Like, yeah, they're, like, boyfriend and, like, girlfriend. Like, they're, like, broken up then. But in another way, I feel like they were, like, best friends that had broken up. And they don't know now what they want. And I feel like in that aspect, it kind of makes it harder. So, I feel like what we learned from this episode, from Joey and Pacey's perspective, I feel like Pacey is learning to rebound. And Joey is learning what Pacey just learned. And together, they were just silly and goofy, which I really love. They were kind of flirty. But I feel like once Pacey, like, learned what he needed, he learned that it was kind of like he wanted someone to rebound with, and Jen was that person because he knew that he was going to do with Joey. And in a sense, I also feel like them two learned, like, together, not like together, but in like separately, but when we mix it together, this is what they learned. I feel like they learned that, like, boys and girls, like, or like whatever gender you like, it's kind of hard to, like, keep yourself in a friend zone because either way you'll kind of like each other. And we also learned the 3 things that I've talked about with Pacey, like, his, like, they kind of make him like a sexual guy and an insecure guy in this episode. And for Joey, they kind of focus on, like, Dawson and how, like, her perfectionism and that kind of stuff, where she wanted Dawson to always be there for her. But I feel like it went back to Joey wanting a safe place, and because she never really dealt with that when she was little, like, she knew what her safe place was, but she didn't have, like, 2 safe places. Like, you always have that safe person. And I feel like that's what Joey's trying to learn again, is who is her safe person. And it's kind of sad that Dawson is her safe person for that, and she doesn't know who else to go to. But I feel like slowly, when you do kind of go back to Pacey and Joey, I feel like Pacey will turn into her safe place later in the season. So, if you like this episode, please make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. That's Jacey's Creek Podcast, where I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's also other platforms that you can listen to, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to review this podcast with kind words, please, only. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. And also, you can catch every episode again on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I would love to hear your thoughts on Instagram. That's Witter and Potter. And my TikTok is Pacey and Joey. I hope to see you guys again Friday and Saturday and Sunday. I love hearing your guys' thoughts, so please, 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 please make sure to comment down below. Bye, guys.